The maintenance bay of the orbital research station hummed with the familiar sounds of recycling systems and power generators. But tonight something was different. Jace Meridian paused in his work on the gravity stabilizer, his engineer's instincts picking up an unusual resonance in the air. The tools on his workbench were vibrating at a frequency that shouldn't exist anywhere near the station's standard operating systems. He set down his plasma wrench and activated his scanner, watching the display with growing concern as it registered energy patterns that defied every principle of physics he'd learned in 15 years of working with space-grade technology. The readings were impossible, quantum fluctuations that suggested reality itself was becoming unstable in a localized area near the rear bulkhead. "Station Control, this is Meridian and Maintenance Bay 7, he called through his comm unit, keeping his voice steady despite the way his skin was beginning to tingle with static charge. "I'm reading some unusual energy signatures down here. You getting anything on your sensors?" "Negative, Meridian. All systems showing normal parameters. Probably just interference from the solar flare activity we've been tracking." But Jace knew this wasn't solar interference. The air itself seemed to be shimmering now, like heat waves rising from summer pavement, except the temperature hadn't changed. He approached the disturbance slowly, every survival instinct telling him to evacuate the bay, while his curiosity as an engineer demanded he investigate further. That's when he saw her. She materialized gradually, like an image slowly coming into focus, her form flickering between solid and translucent. A woman unlike any species he'd encountered in his travels through the outer systems, tall and graceful, with skin that seemed to contain starlight and eyes the color of nebulae. Her clothing appeared to be made of some kind of energy field that shifted and flowed around her body like liquid mercury. "Please," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made his bones resonate. "You have to help me. I need to break out of here." Jace's hand moved instinctively toward the emergency beacon, but something in her expression stopped him. There was desperation there, yes, but also intelligence and a kind of exhaustion that spoke of struggle rather than aggression. She wasn't a threat, she was someone in trouble. "Break out of where?" he asked, noting how she seemed to be fighting to maintain her physical form, her outline wavering like a bad holographic projection. "Are you being held prisoner on the station?" "I haven't seen any security alerts. Not the station," she said, managing a bitter laugh that sounded like music played through broken speakers. "I'm trapped between dimensions, caught in a quantum loop that keeps pulling me back and forth between realities. I can only manifest in your dimension for brief periods, before the pull becomes too strong." As if to demonstrate her point, her form suddenly became more transparent, and Jace could see the maintenance equipment through her body. She pressed her hands against something invisible, her face contorting with effort as she fought to remain visible. "My name is Nick Solara," she continued, her voice fading in and out like a weak radio signal. "I've been trying to communicate with someone in this dimension for months, but most people can't see me clearly enough to understand what I'm saying. You're different. Your neural patterns are more sensitive to quantum fluctuations." Jace found himself stepping closer, fascinated, despite the impossibility of the situation. "How do you know about my neural patterns? And what do you mean, trapped between dimensions?" "That's purely theoretical physics. Theoretical in your dimension, maybe in mine. Dimensional manipulation is advanced technology." Her form solidified again, and he could see the details of her face more clearly. High cheekbones, features that were almost human, but with subtle differences that spoke of evolution under different stars. "I was part of a research team studying interdimensional barriers when our equipment malfunctioned. The others were killed instantly, but I was caught in the dimensional flux." The scanner in Jace's hand was going crazy now, registering energy levels that should have been impossible to generate outside of a stellar core. But instead of fear, he felt a growing sense of purpose. This was the kind of problem that engineering was meant to solve. Someone was trapped, and they needed his help to get free. "What kind of help do you need?" he asked, setting the scanner aside and giving her his full attention. "I'm not a physicist, but I know quantum mechanics, and I have access to some pretty sophisticated equipment." Nix's expression showed surprise mixed with something that might have been hope. "You believe me? You're not going to call security or run away, lady. I've been working on space stations for most of my adult life. I've seen stellar phenomena that would make most people question reality. A beautiful woman appearing out of thin air asking for help. That's just Tuesday in my book." He managed a smile, trying to project confidence despite having no idea how to help someone escape from interdimensional imprisonment. "The dimensional flux creates a kind of prison," Nix explained, her form becoming more stable as she focused on the explanation. "I'm anchored to multiple realities simultaneously, unable to exist fully in any one dimension. Every time I try to solidify in your reality, the quantum strings pull me back toward my own dimension. But every time I try to return home, the same forces drag me back here." Jace was beginning to understand the technical aspects of her situation, though the solution was far beyond his current capabilities. "So you need something to cut those quantum strings, or at least stabilize them so you can choose which dimension to exist in." "Exactly. But it requires more than just technical knowledge. It requires someone willing to serve as an anchor point to provide the dimensional stability that the equipment can't generate on its own." She looked at him with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. "It's dangerous. The process could trap you in the same flux that's holding me." The rational part of Jace's mind was screaming warnings about unknown technologies and impossible physics, but he found himself nodding anyway. There was something about Nix that transcended logical analysis, a connection that felt deeper than mere sympathy for someone in trouble. "I'll help," he said simply, "but I'm going to need to understand more about how this dimensional flux works, and we'll need access to quantum manipulation equipment that's way beyond what I have in this maintenance bay." Nix's face lit up with an expression of joy so pure that it seemed to make the air around her sparkle. "Thank you, Jace Meridian. You have no idea what this means to me." "How do you know my name?" he asked, realizing she'd never actually introduced herself properly. "When you exist partially in multiple dimensions, you pick up information from quantum resonances," she said, her form beginning to flicker again. "I have to go. The pull is getting stronger, but I'll try to return tomorrow. At the same time, can you research quantum dimensional theory before then?" "I'll do what I can," Jace promised, watching as she faded from view like a dream dissolving in the morning light. Alone in the maintenance bay, surrounded by the familiar hum of station machinery, Jace wondered if he'd just imagined the entire encounter, but his scanner was still registering unusual quantum signatures, and something deep in his chest told him that his life had just changed in ways he couldn't yet understand. He had work to do. Jace spent the night diving through the station's technical databases, his eyes burning from hours of reading theoretical physics papers that stretched his engineering background to its limits. By morning, he had a basic understanding of dimensional membrane theory and quantum entanglement principles, but he knew he needed expert help. Professor Kira Voss ran the station's experimental physics lab, and while she had a reputation for being brilliant and intimidating in equal measure, she was his best hope for understanding Nix's situation. He found her in her laboratory, surrounded by holographic displays showing complex mathematical equations that seemed to shift and evolve as he watched. "Meridian," she said without looking up from her work, her silver hair catching the light from the displays. "I heard you were asking the database for information about dimensional physics. Interesting career change for a maintenance engineer. I need your help with something unusual," Jace said, deciding that honesty was his best approach. "Someone came to me yesterday claiming to be trapped between dimensions. I know how it sounds, but I have scanner readings that suggest she's telling the truth." Kira finally turned to face him, her green eyes sharp with scientific curiosity. "She? You're talking about a person, not a theoretical construct." Jace activated his portable scanner and showed her the quantum signature readings he'd recorded during Nix's visit. Kira's expression shifted from skeptical amusement to intense focus as she studied the data. "These readings are impossible," she said, but her tone suggested she was intrigued rather than dismissive. "The quantum fluctuation patterns indicate matter existing in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. If this is real, It represents a breakthrough in our understanding of interdimensional physics. It's real, Jace said firmly. She supposed to return tonight. Would you be willing to meet her? Before Kira could respond, Nyx materialized in the center of the laboratory, her form more unstable than it had been the previous day. She looked exhausted, her starlight skin dimmed and her energy field clothing flickering erratically. Jace, she said, relief evident in her voice. I wasn't sure I'd be able to find you again. The dimensional barriers are getting stronger. Kira stared at Nyx with the expression of a scientist witnessing something that challenged everything she thought she knew about reality. Fascinating. The quantum resonance is creating a localized distortion in spacetime. How long have you been trapped in this state? 8 months in your dimensional time frame. Nyx replied, managing to stabilize her form enough to appear nearly solid. Though time moves differently when you exist in quantum flux, it feels like years. 8 months. Kira repeated, her mind clearly racing through implications. The energy required to maintain dimensional existence for that long should have killed you. What's serving as your power source? Nyx's expression grew pained. The same accident that trapped me created a connection to someone in my home dimension. Zendero. He was my research partner, and she glanced at Jace, my closest companion. He's been trying to pull me back home, but his efforts are actually making the situation worse. As if summoned by her words, the air near Nyx began to shimmer with a different kind of energy. A male figure materialized as a translucent projection, tall and lean, with features similar to Nyx's, but more angular, his eyes blazing with desperate intensity. Nyx. Zen's voice came through as if from a great distance. I've been working on a new resonance pattern. If you can align your quantum signature with mine, I can pull you back through the dimensional barrier. Zen, no, Nyx said, backing away from his projection. Every time you try that, it makes the flux stronger. I've told you, we need to find another solution. There's no other solution, Zen insisted, his image flickering with emotional turbulence. You belong in our dimension, with our people, with me. This primitive reality can't provide what you need to survive. Jace felt a stab of something uncomfortably like jealousy as he watched the interaction between Nyx and Zen. Their connection was obviously deep and complex, built on shared experiences and a relationship that predated her dimensional imprisonment. Zen, please, Nyx said, her voice gentle but firm. I've found someone here who understands the technical aspects of my situation. Professor Voss and Jace might be able to help me find a way to stabilize my existence without forcing me back into dimensional flux. Zen's projection turned toward Jace and Kira, his expression showing barely contained hostility. Primitives playing with forces they don't understand. Nyx, they'll kill you with their crude experiments. Our technology may be different from yours, Kira interjected, but our theoretical understanding of quantum mechanics is quite sophisticated. If you're truly trying to help her, you should be willing to cooperate instead of making the situation worse with your rescue attempts. Cooperate with inferior beings who couldn't even detect her presence without special equipment. Zen's form flared brighter with anger. I've devoted my life to dimensional research. I know what needs to be done. You know what you want to be done, Nyx corrected, her own form becoming more solid as if drawing strength from the confrontation. But what I need is the freedom to choose which dimension I want to exist in, not to be pulled back and forth between realities by forces I can't control. Jace watched the exchange with growing understanding. Nyx wasn't just trapped by dimensional physics, she was caught between two realities. In an emotional sense as well, Zen represented her past, her home dimension, and a relationship that had defined her identity before the accident. But her time in this dimension, her interaction with Jace, was offering her something different, the possibility of choosing her own path. There might be a way to break the quantum entanglement, Kira said, studying her readings of the dimensional interaction. If we can create a localized field that dampens the dimensional flux, Nyx could stabilize in whichever reality she chooses, but it would require precise calibration and considerable risk. Risk to who? Jace asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. To anyone serving as an anchor point during the stabilization process, Kira replied. The person would Need to maintain physical contact with Nyx while we calibrate the field generators. If something goes wrong, they could be pulled into the dimensional flux along with her. Zen's projection blazed with fury. You're talking about experimenting on someone I care about more than my own life. I won't allow it. It's not your choice to allow or forbid, Nyx said firmly. It's my choice, and I choose to try. Then I'll find a way to force you back to our dimension before you can make this mistake, Zen threatened, his image beginning to fade. I won't lose you to inferior beings who can't possibly understand what you mean to me. As Zen's projection disappeared, Nyx stumbled, her form becoming unstable again. Jace moved instinctively to support her, surprised when his hands made solid contact with her shoulders. He's pulling harder now, she gasped, fighting to maintain her coherence. Professor Voss, how quickly can you prepare the stabilization equipment? I'll need at least 2 days to modify our dimensional field generators, Kira replied. Already making notes. Can you maintain your presence here that long? I don't know, Nyx admitted, leaning against Jace for support. But I'll try. This might be my only chance for freedom. As she faded from view, Jace found himself holding empty air, but the warmth of her touch lingered on his palms. He looked at Kira, who was staring at her instruments with the expression of someone who'd just witnessed a revolution in scientific understanding. This is either going to be the most significant breakthrough in dimensional physics, she said quietly, or it's going to kill all 3 of us. Jace nodded, knowing that despite the risks, there was no question about whether he would help. Nyx had asked him to break her out of her prison, and he was beginning to understand that her prison wasn't just dimensional, it was the inability to choose her own reality. The next day brought complications Jace hadn't anticipated. He was in his quarters, studying Professor Voss's preliminary notes on dimensional stabilization, when his door chimed with an incoming visitor. He opened it to find Talia Cross standing in the corridor, her familiar smile bringing back memories he'd spent 2 years trying to forget. "Hello, Jace," she said, her dark eyes showing the mixture of confidence and vulnerability that had once made his heart race. "I heard you were working on something interesting. Mind if I come in?" Talia had been his partner for 3 years, both romantically and professionally. They'd worked together on some of the most challenging engineering projects in the outer systems before their relationship had ended in mutual frustration and unresolved arguments about their different goals in life. Seeing her now, with her red hair shorter than he remembered and her engineer's uniform bearing the insignia of a senior systems specialist, brought back feelings he thought he'd successfully buried. "What are you doing here, Talia?" he asked, stepping aside to let her enter. "Last I heard, you were working on the new colony ships in the Alpha Centauri system." "I was," she said, looking around his quarters with the critical eye of someone evaluating living conditions. But when word got out that maintenance engineer Jace Meridian was suddenly requesting access to theoretical physics databases and exotic matter research, I got curious. You never showed interest in anything beyond practical applications. Jace felt a familiar frustration rising. Talia had always been brilliant at reading people and situations, but she'd also had a talent for arriving at the worst possible moments, with observations that complicated everything. "People change," he said carefully. "I've developed some new interests, or a new woman." Talia's smile was sharp with the kind of insight that had made their relationship both exciting and exhausting. "I've been reviewing the station logs, energy fluctuations in Maintenance Bay 7, requests for information about dimensional physics, and now Professor Voss has requisitioned equipment for something she's calling Project Quantum Freedom, very romantic name for a physics experiment." Before Jace could respond, the air in his quarters began to shimmer with the now familiar signs of Nyx's arrival. She materialized gradually, her form more unstable than ever, clearly struggling against increasing dimensional pressure. "Jace," she said urgently, "Zen is trying something new. I can feel the dimensional barriers shifting. We may not have as much time as Professor Voss thought." She stopped speaking as she noticed Talia, her luminescent eyes taking in the other woman's presence with an intelligence that missed nothing. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had company." "This is Talia Cross," Jace said, feeling awkward about the introduction. Talia, this is Nix Solara, the person I've been trying to help. Talia stared at Nix with the expression of someone whose understanding of reality had just been fundamentally challenged. She's not human, she said, her engineer's mind cataloging details, and she's not entirely solid. Some kind of advanced holographic projection? I'm trapped between dimensions, Nix explained, her form flickering as she fought to maintain stability. Jace and Professor Voss are helping me find a way to break free from the quantum flux that's holding me, trapped between dimensions, Talia repeated, her skepticism warring with the evidence of her own eyes. And you've convinced Jace to risk his life helping you escape from this theoretical prison. It's not theoretical, Jace said firmly. I've seen the quantum readings. Professor Voss has confirmed the dimensional physics. Nix needs help, and I'm going to provide it. Talia's expression shifted to something Jace recognized, the look she got when she was analyzing a complex problem and finding flaws in proposed solutions. Let me guess, she said, focusing on Nix. The rescue process requires someone to serve as an anchor point, maintaining physical contact while dimensional field generators attempt to stabilize your quantum signature. And if something goes wrong, that person gets pulled into interdimensional space along with you. Yes, Nix said simply, but Jace understands the risks, and he's willing to help anyway. Of course he is, Talia said, her tone carrying years of frustration with Jace's tendency to leap into dangerous situations. When someone needed help, he's always been willing to risk everything for people he cares about. It's one of his most admirable and most infuriating qualities. Jace felt heat rising in his cheeks. Talia, this isn't about my psychological profile. This is about helping someone who's trapped and needs assistance. Is it? Talia turned to face him directly. Or is it about the fact that you've fallen for someone who literally can't exist in the same reality as you without your help? Very romantic, very heroic, and very likely to get you killed. That's enough, Nix said, her form suddenly becoming more solid as emotional energy seemed to strengthen her dimensional presence. Jace is helping me because it's the right thing to do, not because of some misguided romantic notion. Really? Talia's smile was sharp. Then you won't mind if I point out that there might be safer alternatives. If your problem is quantum entanglement between dimensions, why not work on strengthening your connection to your home dimension instead of trying to anchor yourself here? Nix's expression showed something that might have been pain. Because my home dimension represents a life I'm not sure I want anymore. The accident that trapped me also showed me possibilities I never considered before. Possibilities like what? Talia pressed. A relationship with someone from a completely different reality? That's not possibility. That's fantasy. It's choice. Jace interrupted, finally understanding what was really at stake. Nix isn't just asking for technical help. She's asking for the freedom to choose which life she wants to live. At that moment, Zen's projection materialized in the center of the room, his form more solid and aggressive than before. Choice, he said, his voice carrying harmonics that made the walls vibrate. Nix, you're talking about abandoning everything we built together, everything we meant to each other, for beings who can't even exist in the same dimensional framework you do. I'm talking about freedom, Zen, Nix replied, her own form brightening with determination. Freedom to decide my own path instead of being pulled back and forth by forces I can't control. I am not a force trying to control you, Zen said, his projection stepping closer to her. I am someone who loves you, trying to bring you home. Home. To what? Nix asked. Home to a research project that nearly killed me. Home to a relationship where my value was measured by my contributions to your experiments. Jace watched the exchange with growing understanding of the emotional complexity underlying Nix's dimensional imprisonment. She wasn't just trapped by physics, she was trapped by competing definitions of who she was supposed to be as Zen. She continued, her voice gentle but firm, I care about you, but I'm not the same person who agreed to participate in your dimensional research. The accident changed me, and my time in this dimension has shown me that I want different things now. Different things like him. Zen's projection turned toward Jace with obvious hostility. A primitive being who doesn't understand the first thing about your nature or your needs. Someone who's willing to help me choose my own path, Nix corrected. Someone who asks what I want instead of telling me what I should want. Talia had been watching the interdimensional relationship drama with the expression of someone analyzing competing technical specifications. This is all very touching, she said, but it doesn't change the fact that the stabilization process is extremely dangerous. Jace, I've been reviewing Professor Voss's preliminary calculations. The margin for error is essentially zero. Then help us improve the calculations, Jace said, surprising himself with the request. You're better at complex systems analysis than anyone I know. If there's a way to make the process safer, you'll find it. Talia looked at him for a long moment, her expression showing the internal struggle between her protective instincts and her curiosity about the technical challenge. You really are willing to risk everything for her, aren't you? Yes, Jace said simply. I am. Then I guess I'm willing to risk everything to keep you alive while you do it, Talia replied. But I want it on record that this is the most complicated rescue mission in the history of interdimensional physics. Nix's form began to fade as the dimensional pressure increased. Professor Voss wants to attempt the stabilization tomorrow, she said, fighting to remain visible. Zen, please don't interfere. This is my choice to make. It's the wrong choice, Zen said, his projection already becoming translucent. But if you're determined to make it, I'll find a way to protect you from the consequences. As both interdimensional beings faded from view, Jace found himself alone with Talia, surrounded by the familiar hum of station machinery and the weight of decisions that would change all their lives. So, Talia said, settling into his desk chair with the casual confidence he remembered, want to tell me exactly how you fell in love with someone from another dimension? The dimensional stabilization chamber hummed with energy that made Jace's teeth ache, its modified field generators creating localized distortions in spacetime that Professor Voss monitored through banks of instruments that registered readings beyond normal physics. Talia had spent the night recalibrating the safety protocols, her engineering expertise complementing Kira's theoretical knowledge in ways that gave Jace hope. The procedure might actually work. The quantum field is as stable as we can make it, Kira announced, her hands dancing over holographic controls. But I have to warn you again, if the dimensional anchoring fails, we could lose both of you to interdimensional space. I understand the risks, Jace said, though his palms were sweating, as he approached the center of the chamber where Nix would need to materialize. Are you sure there isn't a way to automate the anchoring process? Dimensional stabilization requires a conscious mind capable of maintaining quantum coherence, Talia explained, checking her modified scanner readings. The anchor point has to be someone who can focus their mental energy on keeping Nix grounded in this reality, while the field generators break her connection to the dimensional flux. In other words, Kira added grimly, you have to want her to stay here more than Zen wants her to return to their dimension. It's literally a contest of wills, conducted through quantum entanglement. Before Jace could respond to the implications of that statement, alarms began sounding throughout the laboratory, the air filled with an energy signature unlike anything they'd detected before. Not the familiar shimmer of Nix's arrival, but something harder, more aggressive. Unknown dimensional incursion, Talia reported, her instruments registering off-scale readings. Something big is trying to break through into our reality. The something turned out to be someone, a figure that materialized with explosive force, sending equipment flying, and creating a localized gravitational distortion that made breathing difficult. The being was humanoid but clearly not human, standing nearly 7 feet tall with skin that seemed to absorb light, and eyes that burned with inner fire. I am Orin Flux, the creature announced, its voice carrying harmonics that hurt to hear. Interdimensional hunter, first class, authorized by the Quantum Council to apprehend dimensional fugitives, Kira demanded, though she kept her distance from the imposing figure. Nix isn't a fugitive, she's a victim of a dimensional accident. Nix Solara is a being capable of existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously, Orin replied, his burning gaze sweeping the laboratory. Such individuals are considered extremely dangerous by civilizations throughout the multiverse. I have been tracking her quantum signature for months. Tracking her for what purpose? Jace asked, stepping forward despite every survival instinct telling him to run. Beings with multidimensional existence can destabilize entire reality matrices, Oren explained, his tone suggesting he was reciting from some kind of official manual. The Quantum Council has determined that such individuals must be contained in specialized facilities, where their abilities cannot threaten dimensional stability. You're talking about imprisonment, Talia said, her engineer's mind cutting through the official language to understand the practical implications. You want to lock her up because she might be dangerous. I want to prevent her from accidentally destroying multiple realities, Oren corrected. The dimensional flux that holds her is already creating instabilities in 17 different dimensional matrices. If she continues to exist in her current state, the damage could become irreversible. At that moment, Nyx materialized in the center of the chamber, her form more unstable than ever. She took one look at Oren and her expression shifted to pure terror. "Hunter," she whispered, backing toward Jace. "I didn't know they'd found me." "You cannot escape interdimensional justice," Oren said, raising one hand to reveal some kind of energy weapon. Integrated into his palm, submit to containment, and the process will be painless. "Containment where?" Jace demanded, moving to stand between Nyx and the hunter. "What kind of specialized facility?" "Dimensional prison," Nyx said, her voice hollow with despair. "They lock multi-dimensional beings in quantum stasis, conscious, but unable to affect any reality. It's considered a fate worse than death among my people. Better than allowing you to destabilize the multiverse," Oren replied, his weapon beginning to charge with energy that made the air crackle. "Step away from the fugitive, primitive. Your interference will only make her capture more difficult." "No," Jace said firmly, reaching for Nyx's hand and finding it solid enough to grasp. "She's not going to prison for the crime of existing in a way that makes other people nervous." "Jace, don't," Nyx pleaded. But her form was already becoming more stable as their physical contact created the quantum anchor. "Effect, he'll kill you if you interfere with his mission." "Then we've finished the stabilization process now," Kira announced, her hands flying over the control systems. "Talia, bring the field generators online. If we can anchor Nyx to this dimension before the hunter can capture her, she'll be beyond his jurisdiction." "Impossible," Oren said. But his weapon was now trained on the field generators rather than on Nyx. "The stabilization process requires precision and time. I can disrupt your equipment faster than you can complete the procedure. Not if you're dealing with multiple targets," Zen's voice said as his projection materialized with unusual solidity. "Hunter, your quarrel is with the Quantum Council's policies, not with Nyx. She didn't choose to become multidimensional." "Zendero," Oren acknowledged, his attention dividing between multiple threats. "You are also wanted for questioning regarding illegal dimensional research." "Then you'll have to catch me first," Zen replied, his projection suddenly blazing with energy as he directed some kind of attack at the hunter's weapon systems. What followed was unlike any battle Jace had ever witnessed. Oren fought with weapons that seemed to bend reality itself, while Zen countered with projections that created localized distortions in spacetime. Meanwhile, Kira and Talia worked frantically to complete the stabilization procedure while the laboratory, filled with energy discharges that threatened to destroy their equipment. "Jace," Nyx said urgently, her form flickering as the dimensional combat around them affected her stability. "The anchoring process, you have to focus on wanting me to stay here, not just intellectually, but emotionally. The quantum field responds to conscious intention." Jace looked into her luminescent eyes, seeing not just someone who needed rescue, but someone he had come to care about deeply over there. Brief time together, her intelligence, her courage in facing an impossible situation, her determination to choose her own path, these weren't just admirable qualities. They were aspects of a person he was falling in love with. "I want you to stay," he said, squeezing her hand as the field generators hummed to life around them. "Not because you need saving, but because I can't imagine this reality without you in it." The quantum field responded to his emotional commitment, creating a stabilization effect that made Nyx's form solidify dramatically. But the process also created a connection between them that went beyond mere physical anchoring. Jace could suddenly sense her thoughts, her feelings, her deep gratitude mixed with fear, that he might be sacrificing his own safety for her freedom. "Field generators at maximum," Talia reported, her voice tight with concentration. "But the dimensional combat is creating interference. I'm not sure we can maintain stability long enough to complete the process. Then I'll give you the time you need," Zen said, his projection turning toward Nyx with an expression of profound sadness. "Goodbye, Nyx. I hope you find the happiness in this dimension that I couldn't give you in ours." His projection exploded outward in a burst of energy that temporarily overwhelmed Orin's weapons, giving the field generators the few crucial seconds they needed to complete the anchoring process. When the energy discharge faded, Zen was gone, and Nyx was standing solid and real in Jace's arms. "Impossible," Orin said, his weapon no longer registering Nyx as a multi-dimensional target. "She has been anchored to a single reality matrix. The quantum signature is stable, which means she's no longer under your jurisdiction." Kira said firmly, "Nyx Solara is now a resident of this dimension, with all the rights and protections that entails." Orin studied his readings for a long moment, then slowly lowered his weapon. "The stabilization appears to be permanent. The threat to dimensional stability has been resolved." He turned his burning gaze toward Jace and Nyx. "You have chosen to limit yourself to a single reality for the sake of a primitive being. I hope you find the sacrifice worthwhile." "It's not a sacrifice," Nyx said, her voice carrying a certainty that resonated through the quantum field, still connecting her to Jace. "It's a choice, and for the first time in months, it's a choice I got to make freely." As Orin faded from their dimension, returning to whatever realm interdimensional hunters called home, Jace found himself holding someone who was finally completely real. The quantum connection between them was still active, allowing him to sense her relief, her gratitude, and something deeper, an emotion that matched his own growing feelings. "So," Talia said, breaking the moment with typical engineering practicality, "what happens now? You've successfully rescued someone from interdimensional imprisonment, but she's going to need legal documentation, housing, probably a job if she wants to stay on the station." Jace looked at Nyx, seeing his own hopes reflected in her luminescent eyes. "What do you want to happen now?" "I want to learn what it means to exist fully in one reality," she said, her smile brighter than her natural luminescence. "And I want to 6 months later." Jace stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed Interdimensional Research Institute, watching Nyx conduct a seminar for graduate students on quantum consciousness theory. Her adaptation to single-dimensional existence had been remarkable, though she still retained abilities that made her invaluable to scientists studying the intersection of physics and consciousness. "She's quite something," Professor Voss said, joining him at the observation window. "The papers she's published on dimensional stability theory have revolutionized our understanding of quantum mechanics. Half the research institutions in known space want to hire her, and the other half want to study her," Jace replied, noting the protective instincts that still activated whenever he thought about Nyx becoming the subject of scientific investigation. Rather than a colleague conducting it, she can take care of herself, Kira observed. The dimensional anchoring process may have stabilized her existence in this reality, but it also enhanced certain aspects of her consciousness. Her ability to perceive quantum probability matrices is unprecedented. Through the observation window, Jace watched Nyx demonstrate something that looked like minor reality manipulation, causing a holographic display to show multiple potential outcomes simultaneously while explaining how conscious observation affected quantum state collapse. Her students were fascinated, taking notes on theories that would have been considered impossible before her arrival. "Dr. Meridian," one of the students called out, having noticed Jace in the observation deck, "Professor Solara says you were instrumental in developing the dimensional anchoring techniques she uses in her research. Will you be co-authoring her next paper on consciousness-directed quantum field manipulation?" "That depends on whether she needs an engineering perspective on the practical applications," Jace replied, still amazed that his life had evolved from maintaining life support systems to collaborating on research that pushed the boundaries of known science. After the seminar ended, Nyx joined him in the observation deck, her presence still causing a slight shimmer in the air that most people attributed to unusual lighting effects. Their quantum connection had stabilized into something more subtle than the dramatic anchoring process, but it remained strong enough that they could sense each other's emotional states across significant distances. "How did the session go?" he asked, though he could already sense her satisfaction with the student's progress. They're beginning to understand that consciousness isn't separate from quantum mechanics. It's an integral part of how reality functions, she said, settling beside him to watch the stars visible through the station's main viewport. "In my home dimension, these concepts were well established. Here, they're revolutionary. Do you ever regret choosing this dimension over your own?" Jace asked, a question that had occurred to him regularly over the past months as Nix's fame in the scientific community had grown. "Never," she said firmly, taking his hand with the natural intimacy that had developed between them. "In my home dimension, I was defined by my relationship to Zen and my contributions to his research projects. Here, I'm free to explore my own interests and develop my own theories. And your relationship to me doesn't define you the same way?" Nix's luminescent patterns shifted to colors. He'd learned to associate with amusement mixed with affection. "Our relationship enhances who I am instead of limiting who I can become. That's the difference between love and possession." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent chime from Jace's communication device. Talia's voice came through with the kind of tension that indicated a serious problem. "Jace, Nix, you need to get to the main laboratory immediately. We're detecting unusual dimensional readings near the outer sensor ray." They found Talia and Professor Voss surrounded by displays, showing quantum signatures that looked disturbingly familiar. The readings indicated something trying to break through from another dimension, but the energy patterns were more chaotic than anything they'd previously encountered. "It's not a controlled dimensional breach," Kira explained, her expression grim. "Something is forcing its way through the dimensional barriers, causing massive instabilities in the process. The quantum signature has elements similar to Zen's projection technology," Nix observed, studying the data with growing concern. "But it's been corrupted somehow, as if the dimensional matrix he was using has been damaged." "Could he be trying to reach our dimension again?" Jace asked, remembering the sacrifice Zen had made during the battle with the interdimensional hunter. "I don't think he's trying to reach us," Nix said, her luminescent patterns showing fear. "I think he's trying to escape from something." The dimensional breach materialized in the center of the laboratory with explosive force, but instead of the controlled arrival they'd witnessed before. This was clearly an emergency evacuation. Zen's projection appeared, but his form was damaged, flickering with energy discharges that suggested his dimensional matrix was failing. "Nix," he said urgently, his voice distorted by interference, "you have to help them. The Quantum Council has declared war on dimensional research. They're destroying anyone who has knowledge of interdimensional travel." "Who are them?" Nix asked, moving closer to his unstable projection. "Refugees from 17 different dimensional research facilities," Zen replied, his image becoming more fragmented as he spoke. "Scientists, engineers, researchers, anyone who worked on dimensional manipulation technology. The Council has decided that interdimensional travel is too dangerous to be allowed." "Where are they now?" Kira demanded, already beginning to understand the implications. "Trapped in dimensional flux, just like Nix was," Zen said. "But without anchor points in stable dimensions, they're dying. The quantum stress is too much for organic consciousness to survive indefinitely." Jace looked at Nix, seeing his own realization reflected in her expression. "You want us to help them reach this dimension safely. It's the only way to save them." Zen confirmed, "But the process would require multiple anchor points, and the dimensional stress could destabilize your entire reality matrix." "How many anchor points?" Talia asked, her engineering mind already calculating the practical requirements. "At least 12, Zen replied, "and each person serving as an anchor would need to maintain quantum coherence with a specific refugee for several hours while we calibrate the stabilization fields. That's asking a lot of people to risk their lives for strangers from other dimensions." Kira observed, "Not strangers," Nix said firmly. "Fellow researchers who chose to pursue knowledge despite the risks." just like we did. If their situations were reversed, would we want them to abandon us to dimensional flux? Jace felt the familiar stirring of purpose that always activated when someone needed help, and he had the capability to provide it. What do we need to do? I'll put out a call for volunteers, Kira said, already moving toward her communication systems. Scientists who understand dimensional physics and are willing to serve as anchor points for the rescue operation. I'll modify the field generators to handle multiple simultaneous stabilizations, Talia added. It'll push our equipment beyond design specifications, but it should be possible. And I'll coordinate with Zen to establish the quantum connections necessary for successful anchoring, Nyx concluded, her luminescent patterns showing determination mixed with anxiety about the complexity of the operation. Over the next 12 hours, they assembled a team of volunteers from throughout the research station, physicists, engineers, medical personnel, and others who understood the risks but were willing to help save lives. Each volunteer would need to serve as an anchor point for one of the dimensional refugees, maintaining physical and emotional connection, while the field generators attempted to stabilize multiple reality matrices simultaneously. This is either going to be remembered as the greatest rescue operation in interdimensional history, Kira said as they prepared for the procedure, or as the experiment that accidentally destroyed an entire space station. Either way, Jace replied, taking his position as Nyx's primary anchor while she cooler.